Hi, my name's Herminia. On Christmas Eve, my father looked me straight in the eye and said I was a mistake. Not just that I wasn't family. My sister turned away. My brother just laughed. I thought silence was the worst pain until I uncovered what they'd been hiding for decades. And when I said it out loud, the whole room stopped breathing. Want to know what I said? Snow fell in quiet flakes against the windows as I stood on the porch, wiping slush off my boots. Behind the door, I heard laughter, Jolene's loud cackle, Dad's gravelly bark of a command. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Every head turned. Well, look who remembered the address, Jolene said, raising her wine glass like a hostess, welcoming a stray dog. Her voice was sugar-coated with judgment. Hope the city traffic wasn't too hard on your little art therapy job. I shrugged off my coat. It's not art therapy anymore. Oh? What is it this week? She asked with a grin. Uncle Ray chuckled from the corner, his breath thick with whiskey. At least she showed up unlike your mom that one Christmas. The room froze for half a second. Deshawn jumped in. Who wants eggnog? My eyes met Uncle Ray's. He blinked too fast. Something cracked under the surface, a hairline fracture. The room filled with soft conversation again, but the damage was done. I could feel it. Something was off. And it wasn't just me walking in late. The smell of ham and cloves couldn't mask the tension. The dinner table looked like something out of a Hallmark card if Hallmark made cards about obligation and resentment. I took the last seat between Jolene and Deshawn across from Dad. We passed dishes with fake smiles and tighter grips. So, Dad said, slicing turkey like it owed him money, I assume you're still wasting time with those projects. It's work, I said calmly. Jolene leaned in. Oh, come on, Herminia, be honest. It's been, 4 different startups in 5 years? Dad didn't look up. She was always chasing nonsense, like her mother. The fork in my hand trembled slightly. Uncle Ray, voice lower now, muttered, You think Dad ever wanted another kid after your mom left? The air thinned. I glanced at Deshawn. He chewed slower. Jolene pushed mashed potatoes around her plate. I couldn't remember the last time I felt warm in that house. Deshawn stood with his glass. To another year of survival and sarcasm? A few chuckles. Then Dad cleared his throat and rose. To blood. To legacy. To those who carry this name with pride. I raised my glass halfway and mumbled, Pride? For who? Glass met wood with a crack. You don't act like family. You were never blood, Dad snapped. Every noise disappeared. Jolene gasped. Deshawn whispered, Dad? He didn't blink. You're a mistake. Get out. Now. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I stood, straightened my sleeves. You've said that before. But this time, I turned toward Jolene. You knew, didn't you? She looked away. Uncle Ray's drink paused midair. His hand shook. Deshawn stepped forward, but I raised mine. Don't. The clink of a fork dropping echoed through the room. And then I was 9 again, pressed against the front door in the cold, my fists knocking, breath fogging up the glass. No one opened it that night. I had curled up under the porch light, sobbing into my coat sleeve. I heard Dad's voice inside. She's not my blood. Back in the present, I clenched my jaw. Nothing changed. They just got older. I walked through the hallway, the wallpaper peeling at the edges, just like it did when Mom still lived here. The air smelled the same pine cleaner and hidden rot. Outside, snow bit at my cheeks. It felt like something was peeling off me. They didn't want me. Not then, not now. I reached the car and sat behind the wheel without starting it. The silence was deafening. I opened the glove box. Inside, a worn photo. A woman holding me, smiling like she belonged somewhere else. I didn't know her. Not really. But she always haunted the edges of my memory. I ran my finger along the edge. Who were you? I breathed deep. They think they've broken me again. But this time, I'm not bending. I started the car. The GPS blinked awake. Destination 218 Darlene Drive. My old foster home. I laughed once, low and bitter. Guess it's time I visited the ghosts. The headlights cut through the snowfall. I gripped the wheel, felt the chill settle into my chest, not the cold outside, but the kind that lives in silence too long. I used to think being quiet was how you kept peace. Now I know. Silence was just permission. And I'm done granting it. I always believed home was where your family lived. But what if your family only lives in the pain you escaped from? The drive home was quiet. Not peaceful quiet like a church basement after everyone's gone. When I walked into my apartment, it was just past 10. The snow kept falling, but slower now, like even the weather had run out of things to say. I dropped my keys on the table. The sound echoed more than it should have. I stood there a minute, coat still on, staring into the dark. I reached for the wine bottle on the counter, uncorked it. Then I put it back. I poured water instead. The fridge light glared back at me leftovers I made yesterday, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone would show up tonight. I used to do that every year. Overcook, overset the table, just in case. My version of hope was always practical, make space and act surprised if no one fills it. I closed the fridge, leaned against the door. Funny thing about silence, it only stings when you were hoping for laughter. I sat on the floor by my coffee table, tugged the old memory box from underneath. The cardboard flaps were soft at the edges, corners chewed by time and forgetfulness. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside, drawings in crayon, a third-grade report card, a church bulletin with Herminia misspelled twice, then the photo. Faded, torn at the edge, a woman smiling, eyes soft, holding a baby that looked like me but cleaner, calmer. On the back, scrawled in looping cursive, "You are not your start." I held it like it might dissolve. That line hit different tonight. I whispered into the dark, but what was my start? I grabbed my laptop, sat cross-legged and started typing reverse image search. Dragged the photo file in, waited. A name blinked up, Marlene F. My stomach dropped. There it was, a 1,997 article. Local woman flees domestic violence shelter with infant. Disappears. Black and white mugshot. Same eyes. Same mouth. I didn't breathe. Another piece, abandonment, suspected infant later found in public restroom. I closed my eyes. That baby wasn't just any child. It was me. I picked up my phone and texted Deshawn. "Do you remember mom's real name?" 3 dots. Then nothing. Silence. I read it as confirmation. They all knew, and they hated the reminder I didn't come from them. That's why they kept me outside looking in, because I was never supposed to be part of their picture. Just an accident that got framed and forgotten. Memory crawled up from the back of my throat. I didn't want it, but it came. I was 8. Birthday balloons tied to a chair in a foster home kitchen. A woman with soft curls sang, "You are my sunshine." She rocked me like I was breakable and worth the trouble. That wasn't Jolene. Wasn't anyone from Dad's side. It was her. Marlene. I'd buried her face, tucked the memory under 1,000 distractions, safe, out of reach. Like all things that threatened the story they wanted me to believe. I stood and printed the photo, pushed a magnet aside, and pinned it on the fridge door, not hiding it anymore. Then I grabbed my journal. First page, reclaiming the narrative. I wrote in bullet points, no more fake apologies. No more sitting through dinners that smell like guilt. No more traditions dressed up as control. I underlined one line 3 times. My story begins where theirs ends. Let them guard their precious bloodlines like a vault. I'd rather keep my peace. I leaned back, exhaled hard. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. You shouldn't dig into things you don't understand. I froze. Heart didn't pound. It thudded, slow and mean. I took a screenshot, saved it to a locked folder. No more deleting, no more ignoring. I stared back at the photo on the fridge. She looked at me like she dared me to follow through. If you wanted me silent, I said out loud, you should have told me something worth trusting. I sat back at the laptop and opened a blank post. Title, What Christmas Taught Me About Rejection. My fingers hovered over the keys. No tears. No pity. Just facts and flame. But before I wrote a word, I stood and walked to the bookshelf. Behind a stack of old bills was a yellowing envelope. Confidential foster case. 2001. I'd never opened it. Tonight, I did. Inside was a single letter, dated and unsigned, addressed to my daughter wherever you are. I held it in shaking hands. The last time I opened a letter like that, I was 10 years old. And it changed everything. I woke early, Light crept through the blinds, making patterns on the floor where snow drifted against the glass. The apartment was silent, too still for comfort. I carried the envelope into the kitchen, hands trembling, and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, faded. A letter from Marlene, dated just days before an abandonment hearing. She wrote of her fear, her choice, naming a man, David Marcel, dangerously persuasive. My breath hitched. Marcel, so that's how the name came into my life. This wasn't adoption, it was a takeover. I traced the ink with a finger, heart pounding. The world didn't shift around me. I shifted. They didn't give me a place, they buried me alive under a name that wasn't mine. When my phone rang, I nearly dropped everything. Deshawn's name flashed. He sounded cold. "Leave it alone," he said. "You've always been too dramatic." I swallowed. "I learned that watching all of you lie straight-faced." He paused. Then he did what he had to do. He pronounced Marcel's surname with bitter weight, then hung up. I stared at the screen. Fear pulsed in his words, not fear for me, but for what I might uncover. Silence filled the space after the call, louder than any shouting. I dialed the legal aid line I once used for tenants' issues. The voicemail answered. I spoke calm, clipped. "I need to review custody law from the 1,990 seconds. Call me back." I hung up. Then I typed Marlene's last known address into a public records database. My pulse roared as I uncovered a sealed case initials that matched mine in the margin. Sealed, hidden, locked. They treated me like evidence, not a child. I whispered, "They sealed my life like it was a crime scene." It was becoming too much. I wrapped myself in a blanket that should comfort but just brushed cold edges against my skin. "It's not just lies that break you," I said softly. "It's the time you spent trusting them." I remembered that first Christmas at the Marcels where I sat, half hungry, bantam in their home. No one asked if I'd eaten. I closed my eyes. Why was I always grateful for scraps shaped like love? I paused. I didn't cry. I just rocked a little, hands shaking, silence louder than any tears. Then I thought of the locked drawer in Dad's study, always off limits. As a teenager, I peeked once, saw folders that hurt me to look at. In my old journal sketch, I drew that desk and scrawled partial words, Wichita Family Services. I never knew why until now. I pulled my journal, flipped to that page. The words matched a letterhead in this new case file, the sketch, the sealed documents. They linked Marcel to something he never wanted revealed. I closed the journal. My eyes burned. I opened the voice memos app and recorded, quiet, "If anything happens, this is what I know." I spoke of legacy dressed as control, how silence became our discipline. I ended, "I am not your mistake. You will remember me." The recording ended. I exhaled. My duffel bag stood near the bed. I'd stashed evidence, laptop, journal. I lifted the printed photo of Marlene, placed it in a folder stamped evidence. I felt resolve settle over me. I whispered to the quiet apartment, "I gave them my silence. Now they'll get my story." Then I locked the door behind me and walked into the snow, every step firm. I parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way, bundled up against the December wind. Their driveway looked the same, clean. Lined with bricks, Marcel laid himself like he was building a monument. I still had my old key. The lock resisted at first, stiff with time, but it turned. I stepped in. The smell hit me first, pine candles, cheap cinnamon spray. For a second, I was 13 again, standing in that hallway, hoping someone would say, "Welcome home," and mean it. The hallway was dim, cold. My footsteps echoed. Family photos lined the walls, staged smiles, matching sweaters. In half of them, I wasn't there. In the ones where I was, I stood off to the side, barely touching anyone. I moved past them and into the old hall closet. My suitcase still sat there, mold around the edges, untouched like a forgotten ghost. My breath caught. It felt like I had never left. I headed for the study. Bypassing creaky floorboards I still remembered how to avoid. My desk was just where it always had been, against the back wall. I opened drawer after drawer, hands steady until I reached the bottom one, locked, the one I was never allowed to touch. I grabbed a paperclip from the jar nearby, bent it the way YouTube taught me years ago, and jimmied the lock. A click. The drawer gave. Folders, neatly stacked. Custody 1,998, affidavit, Marlowe adoption. My throat tightened. I pulled them out. Papers fell like leaves. There it was. My name, not Herminia Marcel. My birth name. A hospital slip. Date. Weight. Time of birth. Marlene's name next to mine. I stared at it, knees buckling. It wasn't adoption. It was a transfer, a favor, a deal. I was never chosen. I was handed over. I leaned back against the wall, hands shaking. My fingers grazed the edge of the wallpaper. It peeled slightly, revealing faint etchings behind the wardrobe we never moved. I dragged it aside. Scratched into the drywall were two initials, M.F. I touched them. My chest ached. Don't let them erase me. Her voice came back like it had been waiting. I pulled out my phone, recorded a voice memo. If these walls could talk, they'd scream my name. Through the cracked window, I spotted Jolene's car. My stomach turned. I moved to my old room, everything still pink, frozen in time. A Barbie doll on the shelf, blind slats bent upward like they'd given up. My high school yearbook sat on the desk, one page missing my senior photo. Torn, clean. I opened a drawer, found a letter addressed to no one. Faded ink. I hope one day you'll read this. It was from Marlene. My hands shook again. I sat on the edge of the bed. Whispered, I'm reading it now. Footsteps, heavy on the stairs. I stuffed everything back into my bag, heart in my throat. The door burst open. What are you doing here? Jolene's voice sharp, furious. I stood up, slowly. I came to take what was always mine. She glared. You have no right. This isn't your house. Then stop holding on to what doesn't belong to you. I'll call the police. Go ahead. I didn't flinch. She stood there, frozen. Something behind her eyes flickered. Maybe guilt, maybe fear. She stormed out. I didn't move for a moment, then sank back down and opened the documents. Birth certificate, adoption affidavits, a property agreement. Quietly, I read them aloud. Each word tore down the myth. This house was never mine, I thought. But the truth is, I copied the files to a flash drive I'd brought. The old laptop still worked, password the same, Jolene1972. Lightning cracked outside. A distant roll of thunder, like the world waking up. I zipped the bag, closed the drawer, took one last look at the Barbie, at the window, at the place where they tried to erase me. I slipped out the back door into fresh snow. It had started falling again. The house behind me stood silent. I turned once, murmured, You took everything from me. Now I take back my story. I didn't look again. The front door, I noticed, had been left slightly ajar. I sat in the small rented room off Jefferson Street, staring at the documents laid out like puzzle pieces that never quite fit until now. The sun was already fading outside, throwing pale light across the papers. My full name stared back at me, signed in someone else's hand. A name I'd lived under, lied under, disappeared under. I lit a small candle on the windowsill. Not for nostalgia, for focus, for war. I pulled out a notebook and began to draft names. Not memories, not feelings, names. Who had signed what? Who had known what? Who needed to be called out first? And last, at the top, Dorian. I circled his name, then drew a line to Marcel, and under that, the word transaction. I whispered it aloud. That's what I was to them, a transaction. I dialed Dorian. He picked up but didn't say anything. I want to meet, I said. His voice was like a door slamming. You're wasting your time. I have the transfer papers. You want to keep lying? A pause. I'll say this once. You have nothing. I smiled, even though my hand trembled. Then you won't mind this. I texted him a single scanned page. Custody 1,998. My name. His. A signature. I hung up. That was the first time I felt it, not revenge. Not power. Something quieter. Precision. Back on my laptop, I opened a browser and logged into the legal forum I joined anonymously 2 years ago when I was helping a tenant fight an eviction. I uploaded redacted files. Just enough, just the kind of enough that made people whisper. Within minutes, a comment, is this real? Then another, wait, Marlo? That Marlo? I didn't answer. I just watched. By sunset, the post was shared to a Boise discussion board. Then a local watchdog site picked it up. My screen pinged with alerts. I watched views climb like the start of a slow earthquake. I sat back. My pulse didn't race anymore. It held steady. I had entered the game. My phone buzzed again. 20 messages, 6 voicemails, 2 unknown numbers. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years texted, "You okay?" I didn't reply. Instead, I stepped outside. Snow was still falling in soft waves. Everything was quiet. I looked up at the gray sky and whispered, "Let the world see it." I remembered the holidays where no one said my name. Just her. Just the girl. I pulled the letter from my coat pocket, ran my thumb across the seal. The world hadn't changed, but I had. Later that night, I got a new message. Not a text, a memo. From Dorian's company email, addressed to staff. He claimed the documents I shared were altered or misfiled. He implied a forgery. He closed the memo with a sentence I could hear in his voice. This matter is being handled, there will be consequences. An hour after that, a courier dropped a white envelope at my door, inside a cease and desist letter, signed by his legal team, alleging defamation, demanding retraction. Deadline, midnight. No signature from him. Of course not. He never signed anything when it counted. I poured a glass of water, sat at my desk, and stared at the candle's flickering shadow. The words from the letter echoed, "You defame your family name." I spoke aloud. What family? I could have backed off, said it was a mistake, claimed confusion. Instead, I wrote, an open letter. Not dramatic, just facts. I named names, gave dates, explained my absence, not with tears, but with timestamps. I ended it with one sentence, silence does not protect you, it only covers their mess. I scheduled the post to go live during the next family brunch, because, of course, there'd be one. They always gathered the day after to parade their unity. I saved everything to a drive, made 2 backups. I looked in the mirror. Really looked. They tried to bury me under their name. Tomorrow, I'll reclaim mine. I packed my bag, blew out the candle, and walked into the darkening street. The envelope sat on the desk like a threat. I picked it up, sliced it open with the edge of a credit card, and slid the papers out. 4 pages, typed, stamped, official. The tone was clear. Retract or be dragged to court. The phrase unauthorized publication of sealed documents repeated more than once. They were serious or scared. I read it again, slower. They'd rather sue me than admit their lies. I stared at the closing line. Failure to comply by 12 a.m. may result in immediate litigation. My eyes traced the signature at the bottom. Not Dorian's, of course not. Just a lawyer with a firm's name printed in bold. He never signed the ugly things himself. This is legal warfare, I whispered. Fine. I accept the battlefield. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only lawyer who hadn't ghosted me. She answered after 2 rings. You finally read the letter? She asked. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the clock ticking in the background. I did. What now? They want to scare you. That's all it is. Well, it's working partly, but I'm not backing down. Good, she said. Then we respond publicly. You file a counter. You have the documents, right? Everything. Originals, scans, backups. Then we'll send them a cease and desist. Emotional distress countersuits on the table too. But you have to be ready for exposure. I paused. How do I fight without losing myself in it? You don't, she said, but you keep your footing, and you don't flinch. I nodded, even if she couldn't see it. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse clerk's office, documents in hand, hood up, heart drumming hard in my chest. I handed over the file, brief but sharp. Birth records. Transfer signatures. A notarized copy of the sealed affidavit. The clerk gave a quiet nod, then walked it to the judge's assistant. I waited outside in the cold hallway, feet tapping against linoleum. Minutes later, a staffer called my name. They'd scheduled a preliminary hearing. No guarantee, no ruling, but a step. By noon, a reporter from a local station had caught wind. A headline hit the newsfeed. Marlowe family feud, daughter alleges identity suppression. I stood frozen in the hotel lobby, reading it on my phone. My name first and last there for everyone to see. My palms were slick, I swallowed hard. Back in my room, the messages flooded in. Some people I hadn't heard from since college. Some I'd never met. Some warm, some vile. Liar. Brave. Attention-hungry witch. I stepped outside to breathe. The rain didn't let up. It soaked through my jacket, chilled my bones. I tilted my head back and let it wash over me. I thought about that first Christmas where no one saved a chair for me. Thought about the way they spoke around me, never to me. I remembered being 13, hiding in the laundry room with my hands over my ears, trying not to exist. I whispered, "Not this time. I will not be erased again." I went back in, dried off, and turned on my phone's camera. I sat at the edge of the bed, held up the birth certificate, and read the date aloud. No trembling, just facts. I'm not seeking vengeance, I said. I'm seeking acknowledgement. I uploaded it and stepped away. Within the hour, the video had been shared by 3 local journalists, a regional family court blog, and a parenting group I'd never heard of. I watched as the view count ticked up like rainfall on a window. And then came Dorian's rebuttal. His lawyer issued a statement. She's confused, misguided. There is no record of an adoption. Online, comments from their camp called me mentally unstable, claimed I was bitter, unwell, damaged. It didn't shake me like I thought it might. But then my phone rang. The name on the screen stopped me. Ravenna. I answered. Her voice was thin. I didn't want it to come to this. It already did, I said. You don't understand. I begged them not to cut you out. But you stayed silent. I was protecting what little peace we had. For who? I asked. Certainly not for me. A pause. Please, she said, just stop this for the family's sake. I could barely hear her over the sound of my own pulse. I was erased, Ravenna, and you helped. Then I hung up. I sat on the floor beside the desk, back against the wall, hand over my eyes. I didn't cry. I just sat there and breathed. The fight wasn't over. I packed everything back into the file folder. I wrapped the flash drive in a piece of cloth and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. I stood in front of the mirror. My reflection was wet from rain, from sweat, from something that wasn't quite tears. They can sue me, I whispered, but they can't bury the truth. I picked up my bag and headed out into the night. The courthouse lights were still on. I sat in the car with the engine off, parked across from the little community hall. The address glowed on my phone screen. Same address that used to appear on Christmas envelopes, baby showers, graduation invites. This time, I wasn't invited. I stared at the building, warm lights flickering through frosted windows. Laughter inside. I remembered Dad's toast last year, remembered Jolene's look when she walked past me like I was hired help. But tonight, I didn't tremble. I pulled the flash drive from the glove box, clicked it open and closed just once, just to feel it. Tonight they see me, I whispered, stepping out into the snow. Or they hear me. My boots crunched in slow rhythm. I didn't rush, I didn't hide. 2 distant cousins, Drew and Cassie, I think were just stepping in. I stayed close behind, nodding like I belonged. Inside, the room buzzed with fake smiles and warm cider. I slipped in unnoticed until Jolene spotted me. Her jaw clenched. What are you doing here? I held up a pie I'd bought at a gas station. I brought dessert. She looked like she wanted to slap the box out of my hands, but I walked right past her. The meeting table had name cards. Mine wasn't there. Of course not. I took the seat at the end, unfolded a napkin, and placed my tablet on the table. Marcel looked up. His brows twitched. Just a flicker. Enough. Introductions started. Declarations of blessings, business updates. I stood before they could move to prayer. Before we begin, I said, voice steady, I have something to say. Eyes turned. Chairs shifted. I tapped the tablet. The screen came to life, birth certificates, signature scans, blog links with timestamps. These, I said slowly, are your deeds. They explain why I was never welcomed as one of you. The room went still. A wave of murmurs rippled across the table. Marcel stood, slammed his fist. This is not the place. Jolene's voice sliced through. This is betrayal. No, I said, locking eyes with her. This is reclamation. In the back of the room, a door clicked shut. Deshawn. His face wasn't angry. It was tired. He crossed the room with slow steps, passed behind Marcel like a shadow. He whispered, I trusted him too long. I blinked. You knew? He nodded. He kept this from everyone. Then he pulled a folded envelope from his coat. I found this last spring in a desk drawer. It's from Ravenna. She confirms your birth. She begged Marcel to stop the cover-up. I opened the letter. My knees didn't buckle, but my chest, it clenched. Before anyone else could speak, the room exploded. Half the family yelling, some demanding I shut it down, others yelling over each other, not even sure who they were defending. Marcel pointed at me. You want attention. That's all this is. No, I said, calm now. I want truth. Then I tapped the tablet again. Audio played. Ravenna's voice, clear and trembling. I never stopped loving her. I just didn't know how to protect her. Marcel said it was for the family. I was weak. Gasps. Jolene covered her mouth. Silence fell. That kind of silence where nobody blinks. I stepped back. I wasn't shaking. Their sanctuary had become a courtroom, and I didn't even need a gavel. Jolene finally stood and walked toward me. Let's talk, in private. I shook my head. I won't be silenced in shadows again. I looked around the table. Familiar faces, some red with shame, some ghost white. Some didn't meet my eyes. One or two did, and didn't look away. I gathered my things, tablet, flash drive, the letter. I just exposed your lies, I thought. Now I'll see who stands by me. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Behind me, the hall buzzed with confusion and panic. I didn't look back. They can pick sides, I whispered. I choose mine. Snow kicked up around my ankles as I walked into the night. Tomorrow wouldn't wait. By noon, I was standing outside the courthouse, folder tight under my arm, flash drive zipped inside my coat pocket. The Idaho cold didn't bother me today, not as much as the memory of years spent invisible. The security checkpoint beeped as I walked through. The officer nodded, handed back my ID. I smiled, thin, and practiced. Past the glass walls, the press waited, cameras at rest but ready. Their eyes darted when they saw me, no flash yet, just watching. Behind them, Jolene stood rigid, her coat draped over her arm like armor. Marcel beside her, staring ahead like none of this had anything to do with him. I didn't nod, I didn't flinch. I walked on. Case 04837, Herminia Reyes versus Dorian Marlowe, motion to dismiss. The courtroom was warmer than outside, but I felt cold inside. The judge, middle-aged with sharp eyes, looked down at the docket, then up at the room. Dorian's lawyer stood, confident, well-practiced. Your Honor, we move to dismiss all claims. The petitioner has presented fraudulent documentation, and the online leaks constitute character defamation. I didn't move. I waited until I was called. Miss Reyes? I rose, stepped forward. My name is Herminia Reyes. I am here not to destroy a reputation, but to reclaim my identity. I slid a document into evidence, my certified birth certificate. Then the sealed adoption transfer, signed years ago under false pretense. Finally, Marlene's letter, her handwriting confirmed by independent forensics. I looked across the courtroom. Not a sound. Even the reporters had paused mid-note. Then came the attack. Dorian's attorney stood. Miss Reyes has a history of instability. Her allegations are not only baseless, but dangerous. He submitted his own proof, a paper that appeared similar to mine, but the dates were off, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. She's weaponized the internet, he continued, to paint herself a victim while dragging an honorable family through the mud. Jolene's lips twisted into a quiet smile. Marcel sat like stone. I held my ground. The truth doesn't care if it's uncomfortable. Then I made my request. I'd like the court to hear a sealed affidavit submitted by Ravenna Marlowe under oath. The judge nodded once. The bailiff connected the tablet. Audio filled the courtroom. I never wanted her to feel forgotten. Ravenna's voice cracked through the speakers. She was my child. But Marcel said it would ruin everything. So I stayed quiet. I let them take her name. Silence. Someone gasped. A tissue rustled. Dorian's lawyer rose fast. This could be fabricated AI, deep-faked. There's no way to verify the authenticity. I held up the chain of custody sheet. Legal stamps. Dates. Signatures. This recording has been in secure possession since January. It's verifiable, documented, and uncontested by any party until today. I looked directly at the judge. If they claim fraud, they need to show proof, real proof. He leaned back, steepled his fingers. The room held its breath. A pause. Then the gavel hit. The court finds sufficient evidence to proceed. The motion to dismiss is denied. Discovery begins immediately. All relevant documents, especially sealed family records, are to be surrendered for review. I exhaled, but only once. Across the aisle, Dorian's face slackened. Jolene dropped her gaze. Marcel shifted, but didn't look up. My knees trembled, but no one could see it. I held my folder tighter, whispered, "My name is finally heard." Back in the hallway, the sun hit harder than I expected. Reporters swarmed, flashbulbs flared, questions flew like arrows. Do you feel vindicated? Was the recording real? What will you do if the family retaliates? I didn't answer. Not yet. I walked straight toward the exit. My voice low but clear. They couldn't silence me here. Now their secrets will next be revealed in public. January 2nd. Light filtered in through the small window of my apartment, casting soft gold onto the hardwood floor. Snowflakes drifted outside like they had nowhere to be, no urgency. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up with a weight on my chest. I sat in silence for a few minutes, staring out at the stillness. My phone was face down. No alerts, no news, no digging for evidence or preparing statements. Just coffee warming my hands and a folded copy of the court ruling spread across the table. The official stamp, the judge's signature, the line that read, "Petitioner's name and claim affirmed." I whispered to no one, "No more hiding, no more shrinking." And I meant it. Later that morning, I pulled open an old drawer. Inside were envelopes worn, some yellowed letters I'd written but never sent. One was to Marlene, one to Dorian, a few addressed to no one but me. I read one aloud. The ink had bled slightly over time, but the words still held. "I forgive you, not because you earned it, but because I refuse to carry your weight anymore." Another read, "I existed even when no one said my name, and now I say it first." One by one, I laid them flat on the table. Then, without much drama, I tore each one down the middle. It didn't feel violent. It felt like closing a door I'd left cracked open far too long. A knock at the door pulled me back. My neighbor, Mrs. Kinsey, mid-70s, always in fleece, stood with a smile. "I saw you on the news," she said. "You were brave, honey, real brave." I thanked her, honestly. She didn't stay long, but the warmth she left lingered. That afternoon, I took a walk. Snow crunched under my boots. A few folks I passed nodded, smiled. One man at the diner said, "I read about you. I believe you. I didn't need applause." That sentence was enough. At the corner bookstore, the owner, Greta, waved me in. "I saved something for you," she said. "Thought you'd want it." She handed me a leather-bound journal. For the next chapter, I held it like it might disappear. I'd spent most of my life being overlooked. Now I was being seen not as the scandal or the mistake, but as someone who endured and stood anyway. Later that day, a certified envelope arrived. The name of a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside, a short, handwritten note, Jolene's script. Her handwriting was tight, careful. "I may never understand everything," she wrote. "But I saw the truth in your eyes that night, and that's something I can't ignore anymore." Attached was a photo, the family portrait from years back, digitally altered. I'd been added to the edge, not centered, not highlighted, but I was there. My fingers touched the edge of the image. A tear came not from pain, but something I didn't have a name for. Maybe it was grace. Maybe just release. The next morning, I walked to the community center, signed up to volunteer with girls' mentorship. During orientation, I stood in front of a half circle of young faces. "You have the right to your name," I told them. "You have the right to your voice. No one gives it to you. You own it." That night, I opened Greta's journal, began to write the full story, in my own words, not for defense or revenge, but clarity. A podcast idea followed. I'd call it From Silence to Voice. I even tested the intro on my phone recorder. As the evening settled, I sat by the window again. Tea now, not coffee. The phone buzzed once, a voicemail. Unknown number. I hit play. A man's voice, older, measured. "You don't know me, Herminia, but I knew your mother. Call me." That's all. I stared at the screen. Didn't blink. "The past might not be done with me after all," I whispered.